All right. So we're going to get started actually, Jeff, with a question for you. Here's the question. It's what were some of the advantages and disadvantages to your ministry in Egypt that resulted from you being a Westerner or a foreigner in that context?
Yeah, so advantages, certainly by God's grace, being, in the West, we have just a wealth of theological education. And so I was able to be educated well, sent out, invested in by some healthy churches that sent me out. But kind of landing there on the ground, advantages on the ground. I mean, certainly there's a curiosity about Americans. That's an advantage. We speak English, which is also a major advantage. So most of the world wants to speak English. So there's an open door there to teach English or to engage around that. Disadvantages, sure. I mean, certainly there's different bigotries and biases against America, especially depending what we do politically. And I mean, we were there for a while. So there was seasons that were very anti-American in the Middle East. We were there for everything that happened in Benghazi. I don't know if you all remember that. That was probably some of the more harrowing experiences. And just being American, not even sharing the gospel, being American in the wrong place could be dangerous, especially if you didn't have culture and language. So kind of overcoming that was a disadvantage. Am I going down the right road here, or do you want to add to that?
I think one follow-up question I have, as you kind of started talking about the political sphere of things, is how do you navigate missions work with something that is naturally going to be political? You're an American living among, people that may or may have biases against them. How do you engage that and not ignore it while also continuing, obviously, a lot of ministry work that's happening alongside?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted myself and our team to primarily be thinking and talking about ourselves as citizens of another world. And so we're trying to just lay down our rights and not kind of engage primarily, even though I have political convictions here, not engage with those convictions for the most part. But in relationship was often how we were sharing the gospel anyway. And so people quickly learn, because politics and religion is so often talked about in the Middle East, people would quickly learn kind of where I was politically, kind of being somewhat neutral, not really interested in talking about that. But I do have a lot of other things I'd be happy to talk to you about. And just kind of almost being uninteresting in some of those ways. I also would say, I think it's right that we here in America feel the weight to do cross-cultural missions, while at the same time seeing the incredible value of equipping nationals who don't have some of those biases and have maybe a skin color or a background or history that's not going to cause as much difficulty, as many hurdles. So we did just try to equip a lot of others as we were ourselves going out with the gospel. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good. Just switching directions a little bit, we have a few questions on preparing for the mission field. Obviously, we're speaking to a lot of people who are currently not in the mission field, and they're here to be interested in it. There's a question that talks about the importance of training and patiently preparing for the field. How should someone who is faithfully living in their local church and now considering cross-cultural missions, how are they to prepare during their time when they're not yet called to the mission field? So that's kind of open. I know you guys all have had seasons of your life when you've been preparing to go. So what is your advice to someone now who feels maybe called but has time to prepare in the immediate? What would be your advice or experiences maybe you've had?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think preparation, begins in your local church and serving in every way you possibly can. And it's easy to think, well, I'll do that once I get overseas, But if you haven't done it in your home culture and your home language, how much more difficult it's going to be to try to do that in a place that is not home, that's very foreign culturally and linguistically. So to gain that experience, but to serve your church meaningfully, but to gain that valuable experience, and then see the fruit thereof, and to experience God at work through you, and for others to experience that as well and receive from you and benefit from you. I think it encourages your faith. It affirms that calling that you may have as you see the fruitfulness and other benefit from your service. So I would just say plunge into the local church as much as you can and serve with your giftings, and continue to serve even in areas where you're not even sure, but it's an area to be able to identify what are my really strengths. And as you see God at work and people respond, and I think that's really an encouraging incubator and environment for you to cultivate those gifts that God is later going to use. And you're going to draw upon that experience once you are overseas. You've seen how God has used you here in your home culture in this ways. And it's going to give you confidence when perhaps at times you're going to doubt yourself, and certainly doubt, but you've seen what the Lord has done, and you're going to trust him for that fruit as you faithfully follow him overseas as well.
Any other comments that you may have?
Back in several years ago, I was involved in a ministry that actually dealt with missionaries that came from the mission field, frustrated, in pain, or somehow they were broken. And I got very interested in that, and I felt the need to get more involved, and that's what actually drew me to that. And most people that have issues is because there was not enough preparation in different areas. A very important area that came up is exactly what Corey said. Not a strong relationship with the local church. And because through the local church, a lot of things come up to the surface. And when you start getting those relationships right in place, a lot of good things happen, and in every area of our lives, we need to be, I hate to say it, but no, I don't hate it. We need to be under a microscope of the local church. And we need to be accountable. And when we keep too private of a life, when actually we're asking to be missionaries, which is going to be going to a public life, if we are not prepared enough, we will definitely have consequences. So I remember hearing some testimonies and seeing, living and trying to help people in the past. And actually, one of the reasons that I had to come back, because I definitely, there were areas in my ministry that, although the ministry went well, but success in ministry can get you to a level that you forget about essentials in your family. And that's when definitely you realize, whoops, I was not prepared. So that's probably I just opened something here, but it's very indispensable. Before you say go, consider the cost. The Lord Jesus said in St. Luke 14, right? Consider the cost. When you're building, consider the cost before you go to war. There's wisdom there.
So as you consider the cost, specifically, you as a husband and father, for you mentioned, and this is for everyone, if you want to chime in, what are the ways that you can make sure you're still parenting well, you're still being a husband well, in the middle of a world and a life that is drawing you so many different directions on the missions field? You could spend 24 hours a day not being a father and not being a husband and still doing God's work. So how do you create space for being a good father and husband while on the mission field?
I'll take a stab. How do you create space for being a husband and a father in the mission field? I think that, you need to go with a good sense of your priorities. We should normally, as churches, be sending out either deacon qualified, deacon type people, or elder type people to start churches. And so part of being qualified to be an elder means that you manage your own home well, and that you know how to prioritize caring for your wife and your children faithfully, as you're also, that's part of what an elder is, somebody who not only does that well enough that they have then capacity to help others follow Jesus. I think the same would be true for missionary, is you're looking for people that can do that well enough and still have capacity to help others learn about Jesus. You're just doing it cross-culturally. How do you carve out time for that? Is kind of what you're leaning into there. Just accountability, healthy conversations with your wife, having brothers speak into what you're doing. And so much depends on your personality bent. You have guys who just are going to go and maybe need to throttle back. Some other guys just need kind of a kick in the pants to say, do more. But so much of that comes as you're living in just biblical community with guys that are speaking into your life, healthy relationship with your wife, listening to her and saying, am I giving enough priority and time to these other fundamental relationships? I would say if you fail at that, you got to go home. I mean, you shouldn't be on the field and not loving your wife well or not loving your kids well.
It's really good. Any other comments you guys want? We can move on to the next one.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. The accountability there. I just want to say, just one of the lies that I think many of us face, not just those preparing to be missionaries, is this is just a season. It is always a season. I'm extra busy. I'll attend to my kids and wife. This is just a really busy season. And we can carry that logic forward, and we're always in that season. So I think, yes, the ability to care for your family is crucial and necessary as a qualification, I think, to be a missionary, as it is to be a leader in the church. And accountability is so crucial. And it really shows the capacity, too. If you're not able to be able to care for your family well and handle the responsibilities, then perhaps you have not been gifted with the capacity to be able to do that. So I think, yes, it needs to happen in the preparation stage as well. You're caring for your family. That's crucial for your qualifications and preparation going forward. Yeah.
So now we have about 3 or 4 questions on different inadequacies people feel as they think about themselves becoming missionaries. To name a few, we have one that says, I feel I am currently not a great evangelist in my secular workspace or around where I live. Another person says, I have a difficulty learning language. Is that something that should keep me from becoming a missionary? So what would you say to people that feel like they have some sort of inadequate, and you can address either specifically language or not a gifting towards evangelizing, as this one person says, or you can address any others that you've seen along the way. What would you say to someone who feels like that?
I think, so you want to have these kind of conversations. I mean, this is fine to offer some thoughts here, but really you want to have them one-on-one with people, particularly pastors in your church who know you well and can kind of look at each of those aspects and say, is this either a disqualifying inadequacy or delaying inadequacy or a doubting inadequacy that you should be more confident in and move on? So for instance, with evangelism, I mean, Paul does command us to do the work of an evangelist. It could be that you're just not being faithful to share the gospel. And yeah, if you're not sharing the gospel because you have just no concern for others and you just never even try to have conversations with others, then I would say start being faithful there before you try to get on a plane and go somewhere else. On the other hand, I've met people that are seeking faithfulness. They might not just be particularly gifted in evangelism, and they might be comparing themselves to someone who is particularly gifted and saying, well, I'm not doing it like that guy who's doing it. There's been times where I've come alongside of somebody and said, but you are seeking faithfulness in this. You are regularly having conversations. And to that person, there's many places on the field where maybe that primary gifting of evangelism wouldn't be what you're primarily using day in and day out. And what a pastor is going to be able to do is just going to be able to know you well and know with your personality traits, with your who you are, who's God made you to be, how faithful are you being in, for instance, evangelism. There was another one that you mentioned, inadequacy.
Language, the ability to learn new language.
Oh, yeah. So certainly, I think that most people, I don't think I very rarely have met anybody that thinks they're good at learning a language. So when I hear that, I'm first like, okay, well, chances are you think you're bad, but you've never really actually gone to another culture and immersed yourself in another culture and learned in just kind of a healthy environment for that. Like kind of the worst way to learn a language is probably how you learned a second language in high school. Like 1 hour every so often, no really immersion to practice it, kind of like maybe some grammar on a whiteboard. But if you go and you learn with friends that you care about that can't speak English, but you're engaging with them and you've got some tools to work through that, a lot of people start to realize, oh, language learning is a lot easier than sometimes we can make it out to be, even though it takes a lot of work. But if somebody's very convinced they can't learn a language, then again, this is a conversation with your pastor. There's certainly places all around the world where less language is needed that are still somewhat least reached. Or where the trade language of English is very helpful. So I would be slow to immediately just kind of count yourselves out for that, but perhaps kind of explore a little bit and say, And then I have met very rarely somebody who just cannot seem to learn a language no matter how hard they try. And to that person, I'd say there's other things to do to serve in the world of missions. So that's not often.
Yeah, it's good. And what do you say, Jeff, as well? I mean, it can be an inhibitor, not being able to learn a language, certainly. But I think what we're looking at is the willingness in your life to put in the hard work, the perspiration and the perseverance. And is there evidence of that? So are you doing the work of an evangelist? You know, we want to see fruit. We expect some fruit, but we don't want to be too hasty to see fruit either. I want to know, is that person doing the work of an evangelist, as Paul, I think, said to Timothy? And then also, is he willing to put into work for language? Would he demonstrate or she demonstrate that same work ethic in other areas? Do we see evidence of that? Because so much I would think on the field is just willing to put in the hard work, laborious, often boring work that's needed, to prepare yourself and put yourself in a position to be used of God and fruitful in that sense. So I think that's almost a bigger question. But there's the jumping right to the aptitude question.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
90% of language learning, 90% I would say is time and effort. If you're just willing to put in time and you're willing to work hard at something, most people can learn it. Now, there is some aptitude, but such a good point, brother.
I just wanted to think about Moses when he said, I can't do this, God. Okay? How did that go? You know what he ended up doing for the rest of his life. Yeah. There's no incompetence that God hasn't taken care of it ahead of time. Okay, so if the Lord has called you, I think that's the most important thing. It's like what we discussed earlier. The Lord says, "Who would go on our behalf?" And then Isaiah said, "Send me. Here I am, O Lord." So I believe that everything starts there, because I guess that we live in a world that has so much influence from self-esteem and makes it all about ourselves. Really, if we're going to serve the Lord in the mission field, we will simply forget about ourselves and think of Christ and just respond to Him. And some way, somehow, it'll happen. That's my thinking. But I haven't had to cross the barrier of language, because I went to the Dominican Republic knowing English. I come as an immigrant to this country, I already knew English. So I don't exactly understand that, but I hope that it helps.
Thank you. I have two questions, and you can decide which one you want to take. So this is kind of a choose your question. Jeff, you talked about relational barriers to people going to the mission field. And that was in the context of family that's not approving. We have two questions. One asks, what if my spouse is being called, but I'm still waiting and struggling for that same conviction? So you have a relational dynamic between husband and wife when it comes to being called to the mission field. And another says, what should I think about as a single person who still wants to be married and is feeling called to the mission field? What would you have to say to that person? So we've got two different questions. I'll let you guys choose whatever one you would like to answer.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, even just the word calling, biblically, as I kind of study that word across the text of Scripture, I'm not sure it's always used how we in America can use it for kind of a subjective sense of saying, because the Lord made me feel this, I know I'm called. Actually, our brother in our breakout had such a good exhortation about thinking about an internal call of an aspiration and an external call of the church coming beside of you and saying, yes, this is what we see in you and we think we should send you. So when you say, well, my husband's called, but I'm not, or my wife is called, but I'm not. I mean, if I was your pastor and talking that through with you more, I probably would say, well, look, the calling he's first given you is this new role of being one flesh. So one of you is not going to be called and the other not. It is going to take either both of you together or both of you stay back. And so what I would be wanting to say to the one that's wanting to go is to just be careful that you're not letting yourself use guilt or manipulation to start to pressure your spouse to feel some of the same burden that the Lord might be working in your heart, but rather take that desire to go and just regularly commit it to Him in prayer and take it to your pastors too, and just trust that if the Lord is giving you that burden and it's truly from him, that he is more than able to give your spouse that same aspiration. And if you're you're the spouse that the husband or wife feels called, but you don't feel called or have that aspiration, that internal calling, well, there I would just encourage you to say one of the ways that God directs us is through the person that we're married to. And so if there's times that my wife has felt a strong leaning towards something that I don't feel, and it's not always right. Sometimes I think I'm right, and we find out, yeah, she was just leaning that way, but I'm right. But every time that she tells me that, because I'm married to her and because I understand this calling, this union is from the Lord, I'm going to take that very seriously. So if you're the spouse that your husband or wife feels called to go overseas, you're not feeling it yet, well, then what you want to do is you want to go before the Lord regularly and frequently, and even over months, and just submit yourself to him and say, Lord, if it seems like you're doing something in my spouse, would you do the same in me if this is from you? And I think the Lord generally, if you both are just pursuing him with that kind of surrender and submission to what would honor him and what would be wise stewardship of your family and your marriage, I think he'll direct, especially as then both of you put that out in front of your pastors and they kind of help sort through the mess of you being in different places. Do you guys want to add to any of that?
Hard to add, my man.
Okay.
Awesome.
There was a second question.
The second question was for the person who wants to be married.
Yeah.
And yet simultaneously wants to go to the mission field, what you would have to say to that person. You don't have to select both. Do any of you have something you'd want to say?
Pray a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that that I've seen both, and I don't really know I have a clear answer. I've seen people that I think would be healthier if they continue to wait and pray for marriage. And I've seen others that say, I'm going to put even the option of marriage on kind of the altar and just trust it to the Lord, and I'm going to go. And I've seen God then respond to that with a spouse out of their obedience, being willing to say, I'm going to put that on the altar, I'm going to go, and the Lord gives them a spouse. I've also seen the opposite. I've seen somebody do that, and 20 years later, they're still sitting there saying, Lord, I said I'd come over here, and you just haven't given me a spouse yet. I don't think it's wrong necessarily to go back to try to be married and to stay in the States longer, to a place where you might be married. But I would pray a lot, and I'd talk to people in my church a lot. Try to put my heart.
Manny, I got a question for you. I love the heart behind this question. It says, I don't feel the call to moving to another country, but I feel the responsibility of supporting those who go. What are the most meaningful ways of making their job easier, in addition to prayer and donation, that are regularly the ways we help them?
Okay. If you don't, first, you need to think of a relationship. Basically, we don't know where the heart of a missionary is at, and they're missionaries just as human as you. I mean, they're as human as your pastor. Sometimes we have this high and mighty thing that our pastors are like somewhere in the seventh cloud, and that's the same thought that we have about a missionary. Just the fact that they cross an ocean and they are somewhere and they're just fine. We pray for them once a week, and that's all enough. It's enough. I would encourage a relationship. So that's something that personally, the way that I would do it is that if you don't have anybody, ask somebody that knows missionaries. Literally, that's what the church is for. So the church has connections. The church has sponsors. It sponsors a missionary. There's something already there. So go after them. So I think that's a connection. I remember that I was taught such a beautiful thing at PRC with my brother Jeff, and when he was still in North Africa, and how that was instituted, and how that connection. And I remember going to a different church. It's a blessed man of God. He and his wife had a ministry in China. He lived in the same predicament as you lived, and Andrew and Rebecca Swanson. And then what happened is that she had an orphanage, and he had a ministry with pastors, and he was a pastor himself. But they had to go persecution, all kinds of things. We prayed for him diligently at church. I'm talking about like before I met him in person, 5-6 years. When he came to our church, it was a Sunday evening service, and you knew that God's presence was right there. I tell you, it was an incredible, impactful experience. And he said, "I've been for years waiting to come to this church. Thank you." Thank you. The name of the church back then was as a Cornerstone Bible Church. And he says, "Thank you, church, for all your prayers." And we knew that we had been praying. We were looking forward to meeting him. He's a very tall man that used to be a football player, but the humility and the spirit in which he was speaking, he says, "I just want to tell you that we would not be functioning without your prayers." And it's like, for us, it's like, why? And he started explaining the different things that he was involved in church. And he said, when a church prays for a missionary, I feel the prayers. And I tell you, I have lived that in my flesh myself. It's just a connection. And probably you've heard that story. I don't remember exactly the state that what this happened, but Andrew told us that story that night about this pastor, this group of people. I don't know if it was in Africa. They're about to get killed, and a few missionaries, were right there, ready to get killed. And the people, I don't know if they were cannibals or what, but they were going to kill them. And at the same time that was happening, 6 hours ahead of them, in the church here in the United States, somebody said, "We need to pray for the missionaries." And they started praying. And the whole thing is that eventually they didn't get killed because all the guys that wanted to kill him had to run away. Months, years come back. These guys come back to the church, the missionaries, and they are giving the testimony, saying, "Oh, thank you for your prayers." And then somehow they connected the whole thing. It happened at the same time, the same day, and it was a beautiful thing. It all starts with prayer, but intentional prayer. You take the prayer guide. You may think, "Oh, this paper, this booklet from Voice of the Martyrs." Jeff was one of those guys that we prayed about, but it was a literally connection for us at PRC. It is just beautiful because you have to establish a connection. Start by praying and contact them. And I'm basically, you don't know the difference you're going to make in a missionary's life. You may prevent him from coming back from the ministry there if you just call them, if you send them an email, if you contact them, and at the same time know that God would bless that relationship, and that missionary will make a difference in your life. Why? Because it's the Lord that's connecting you. Okay, so establish a relationship. Do something about it. We have WhatsApp. We have all these incredible means that don't cost us a penny, right? And we can establish, we can send pictures, stay on top of the, we do indirectly with serving different ministries in Guatemala. There's a ministry to feed people as a connection to share the gospel. I was going to show you a video, but it didn't. We ran out of time. But what I'm saying is that some ministries are not necessarily just sharing the gospel, but what's a connection. In the Dominican Republic, we have those ministries, and it's a connection that for the missionaries, for the people, and But my connection, my ministry is to go straight and have a relationship with the missionaries. You bless one missionary, you bless everything that they touch. So I would encourage that.